A single mother thought she had lost everything. A broken marriage, her assets taken from her, and most painfully of all, the custody of the daughter she loved with all her heart. At the moment, she felt she was collapsing completely. All she could do was cling to her daughter's old tablet and cry. But then, in that very moment, she discovered a 15-second video hidden deep inside a folder. This video was not just a clue. It revealed a horrifying truth that would change their lives forever. This is a story of silent resistance, of justice reclaimed through an unbreakable mother's love, and of a small flame of hope that never goes out.
Before we begin this story, let me know where you are listening from in the comments below.
My name is Rachel Miller. I'm 35 years old. And what I'm about to tell you today will forever change the way you see your own family. They say that when a house becomes too quiet, it's not peace you're hearing. It's neglect echoing in the walls. That morning, the silence was louder than ever. From the outside, we probably looked like one of those polished families you'd see in a magazine. Charming house in Charlotte, North Carolina. A kid with dimples, a husband with a 6-figure job, and a wife who knew how to cook from scratch. Picture perfect. But when you live in the photo long enough, you begin to notice the cracks in the frame. I was up before the sun that day. Again. The kitchen light buzzed softly overhead, flickering for a second before stabilizing. I told Brandon last week that the bulb needed replacing. He said he'd do it over the weekend. That was 3 weekends ago. I stood barefoot on the cold tile, hands deep in soap water, washing the same damn plate twice without realizing it. My mind wasn't where it used to be. Outside the window, the sky was painted with strokes of pale lavender and soft peach. Birds chirped like the world still had magic in it. But inside our house, that magic had long turned to static. I reached for the spatula and flipped the eggs, sunny side up, the way Brandon liked them. He once told me it reminded him of his childhood. My mom used to make them just like this, he'd said, years ago, when compliments still came freely, and I still believed in what we were building. Now I did it out of habit, or maybe out of hope. Hope that maybe today he'd look up, smile, and say, "Thanks, Rach." He never did. As I arranged his plate, I glanced at the old kitchen clock above the pantry, a wedding gift from my aunt. Cheap wood, peeling paint, ticking like it was struggling to keep time. I stared at it longer than I should have. 6:41 a.m. Another day of being needed but never seen. I whispered to myself, voice barely audible over the sizzle of bacon. Every breakfast I make is a gift no one unwraps. My fingers lingered on the edge of the counter. They were dry and cracked. Constant scrubbing, constant cleaning. I hadn't had my nails done in over a year. Brandon said it was unnecessary. I used to enjoy little things like that. Now I just missed who I used to be before I became someone's afterthought. He entered the kitchen without a word. His footsteps were always the same, measured, controlled, like he was walking on stage. The scent of his cologne filled the room, sharp and calculated. He didn't greet me, just sat down, phone in hand, and started scrolling like the entire world was in that glowing rectangle. "Morning," I offered softly, carefully. He didn't even glance up. That was it. I placed his plate in front of him, the eggs perfectly round, the bacon crisp, not too greasy, not too dry, just how he liked it. Still not a word. I wanted to scream or throw the plate against the wall, but instead I poured coffee into his mug and forced a smile. That's what I did. I made things work. I smoothed edges. I filled in the blanks. Lily's footsteps saved me from my spiral. Pitter-patter, pitter-patter. She came around the corner, dragging her pink-stuffed rabbit by the ear, hair a mess, eyes still puffy from sleep. She lit up when she saw me, and something in me flickered alive again. "Mommy," she yawned, climbing onto her chair. I placed a smaller plate in front of her, shaped her strawberries into hearts, like I always did. She gasped. "My favorite." I smiled, genuinely this time. "Of course it is. Only the best for my girl." She looked over at her dad. "Morning, Daddy." "Morning," he replied, barely glancing at her. The phone never left his hand. Lily looked back at me, then at her dad, then down at her plate. There was a brief silence before she reached across the table and rested her little hand on mine. Her voice was quiet but firm. "I like your food better, Mommy." I froze. That one sentence landed harder than anything Brandon had said in months, because it was real, pure, and maybe because, deep down, I needed to hear it more than I realized. Brandon snorted lightly. "She's just being polite." Lily's hand gripped mine tighter, her eyes, those big brown eyes, locked onto mine, and I saw it. Concern. Genuine concern. My daughter, 7 years old, could see I was hurting. And instead of looking away, she reached for me. That was the moment. That was when I knew. Something was fundamentally broken. This wasn't a marriage anymore. It was a performance. And I was the only one still reading from the original script. I looked back at the man across the table, the man I used to love, the man I thought I would grow old with. And for the first time, I didn't see my husband. I saw a stranger in my kitchen. He stood up abruptly, still scrolling, muttered something about a meeting, and grabbed his briefcase. No kiss. No goodbye. Lily watched him leave, then turned back to me. "Why doesn't Daddy say thank you?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. How do you explain to a child that love shouldn't have to beg for recognition? "I don't know, baby," I said finally. "Maybe he forgot how." Lily nodded slowly, then reached for her fork. "Well, I won't forget." I swallowed hard. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them away. Not now, not in front of her. She took a bite of her eggs, then beamed. "Perfect, Mommy." That word, perfect, hit differently that morning. Because the truth is, it wasn't perfect. Not the breakfast, not the marriage, not the house, not me. But in Lily's eyes, in that sacred little space between mother and daughter, there was still love, still belief. And for now, that would have to be enough. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't have known, was that the cracks were about to split wide open, that very day in fact. Because the knock on the door was only hours away. And when it came, it wouldn't just change my morning. It would destroy everything I thought I knew about my life. It was around 10:30 a.m. when the knock came. Just 3 solid taps, not rushed, not hesitant, just final. I had just finished wiping down the kitchen counters. The scent of lemon cleaner still clung to my fingertips. Lily was sitting on the living room rug, trying to braid her doll's hair while the cartoons flickered quietly in the background. The house was unnervingly calm. Too calm, like the air before a tornado touches down. I didn't expect anything that day. No packages, no appointments, no surprises. I should have known better. When I opened the door, a man stood there, mid-30s, red polo, delivery cap pulled low. His smile was neutral, professional, impersonal. In his hands, a plain cream-colored envelope, no box, no branding, just weightless dread folded into crisp paper. "Rachel Miller?" he asked. I nodded, and for a moment I couldn't find my voice. Something in my stomach twisted. "Yes, that's me." He handed it over, tapped his tablet, and left. No explanation, no small talk. I stood in the doorway for a few seconds, staring at the envelope like it might bite me. It had no return address, no stickers, just Rachel Miller printed in cold black ink. The kind of envelope that ends marriages. The kind of envelope that takes custody of your child before you even know it. I closed the door slowly. Lily looked up at me from the rug, sensing something. Children always do. She tilted her head and asked, "Who was it, Mommy?" "Just the mailman, sweetie." My voice was too high, too quick. A lie trying to wear shoes 2 sizes too small. I walked into the kitchen, away from her line of sight, and set the envelope down on the counter. My hands hovered above it. Something inside me screamed, "Don't open it." If I didn't open it, it wasn't real. If I didn't open it, maybe I could go back to the morning before. The morning when the worst thing was a cold husband and a flickering light bulb. But my fingers moved on their own. The flap peeled back with a soft rip that felt like tearing skin. Inside, 6 sheets of paper, neatly clipped together. I scanned the header. Petition for divorce, petition for sole, legal and physical custody motion to freeze all joint assets. Plaintiff, Brandon Miller, defendant, Rachel Miller. My knees buckled slightly. I gripped the edge of the countertop with one hand, the paper with the other. My entire body went cold, like someone had cracked open my spine and poured in ice. I didn't cry. Not right away. I just stood there, paralyzed. A single tear would have felt like permission that I accepted this, that I agreed with whatever monstrous version of myself Brandon had painted in those papers. But then something sharp bloomed in my hand. I looked down and realized I was clenching the spoon from earlier, still in my hand from when I was cleaning. I'd been gripping it so tightly my knuckles turned white. My palm throbbed. The metal had left a deep red imprint across my skin, and just like that, the spoon slipped and clattered to the floor. The noise startled Lily. She turned from the rug. "You okay, Mommy?" I wiped my hands on my jeans, trying to stay upright. My voice came out like breath through a cracked window. "Yeah, baby. Just dropped something." I picked up the papers again, and that's when I saw it. At the very bottom of the last page, under his signature, Brandon had scribbled something by hand. "You failed me, Rachel. As a wife, as a mother. I want a new life without you." There it was, no preamble, no therapy, no warnings, just a cold-blooded execution of everything we once were. Tears came then, fast and sudden, like a dam giving out. But I didn't sob. I didn't scream. I walked to the hallway mirror and looked at myself, really looked. I saw a woman with tired eyes, hair pulled into a lazy ponytail, wearing a faded t-shirt with pancake batter on the hem. A woman who hadn't had a full night's sleep in years. A woman who gave everything she had to a man who just threw it in the trash. Failure, he called me. And yet, somehow, he was the one handing out judgments, like he was God. I read the line again. "I want a new life, without you." The cruelty was surgical. This wasn't just about ending a marriage. It was about rewriting the story, casting himself as the victim and me as the villain. And worst of all, he wanted Lily too. Sole custody, complete control. Like I was some unfit shell of a mother. Like I hadn't stayed up every night with her through fevers, nightmares, stomach bugs, tears. Like I hadn't given my soul to that little girl. And suddenly, something inside me snapped. Not in a way that broke me, but in a way that changed me. This wasn't going to be a quiet divorce. This wasn't going to be me stepping aside. This wasn't going to be him rewriting my story. I walked back into the living room, sat beside Lily, and pulled her into my arms. She smelled like strawberry shampoo and syrup. She leaned into me instinctively. "Mommy?" "Yeah, sweetie." "Why are you hugging me so tight?" I swallowed. "Because sometimes, you just need to remember what matters." She smiled, that gap-toothed smile I loved so much. "You matter." And in that moment, I knew I wouldn't let him win. Not without a fight. You think you're prepared for betrayal when the signs have been there all along. But you're not. The real kind, the calculated, premeditated kind. It doesn't feel like a knife in the back. No, it feels like a slow drowning. 1,000 small betrayals until you can't tell which breath was your last. The morning after the envelope arrived, I woke up with a pounding in my chest before I even opened my eyes. Anxiety, like an alarm clock, built into my bones. I rolled over and reached for Brandon out of habit, only to find the other side of the bed cold. He hadn't come home. Lily was still asleep in the next room, the soft hum of her sound machine filling the air. I lingered there, just watching her, her little fingers curled around her stuffed bunny, her breath steady and pure. She was still untouched by this. I wanted to keep her that way. But I knew I wouldn't be able to for long. I moved through the house like a ghost. I didn't eat, I didn't shower, I just existed. Long enough to sit down at the kitchen table, the divorce papers still spread out like a battlefield. I read them again, trying to make sense of the legal jargon. It was like reading my own obituary, asset control, sole custody, allegations of emotional instability. He'd painted me into a corner so precisely, it felt rehearsed. And that's when I realized it was. Brandon had been planning this for months, quietly moving pieces behind my back while I was folding laundry and making pancakes. I logged into the joint bank account. Password rejected. I tried again. Same result. I called the bank. The woman on the line was polite but distant, like she was used to these kinds of calls. Divorce protocol. She informed me that my access had been revoked due to a court order pending review. A court order? He'd frozen me out legally before I even knew we were ending. I checked the savings. 0. The investment portfolio, locked. I opened a separate browser and checked the utilities, still paid, the mortgage, still auto-drafting. Everything looked normal, but nothing was normal. I reached for the jewelry box on my dresser, needing some form of grounding, a reminder of who I was before this version of me took over. It was empty. I stared at it, heart racing. At first, I thought I was mistaken. Maybe I'd moved things. Maybe Lily had played dress-up and forgotten to put them back. But the velvet lining was bare, my mother's locket, gone. The birthstone ring Brandon gave me the night Lily was born, gone. Even the charm bracelet from college. I ran to the closet. My emergency cash, $400 I kept hidden in a shoebox, was missing too. He took everything, and he didn't even need to break in. It was his house, right? Everything in his name. The mortgage, the car, even the internet bill. I was a guest in my own life. That's when the rage set in. It wasn't fire. It was ice, cold, controlled, paralyzing. I sat down on the floor and shook, hands gripping the edge of the dresser, nails biting into the wood. It wasn't just about money. It was about power. He wanted me powerless, penniless, dependent. I was supposed to crumble, and for a few hours, I did. I lay on the floor in the bedroom, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment from the last year. The missed dinners, the locked phone, the late meetings, the disinterest in everything except his own reflection. Brandon had already left me emotionally. I was just too exhausted to notice. Around 3 p.m., I dragged myself into the bathroom. I sat on the closed toilet, the cool porcelain grounding me for a second. I stared into the mirror above the sink. My eyes were bloodshot. My hair was pulled into a messy knot. There was a gray streak I hadn't noticed before, and my skin looked thin, almost transparent. Was this who he thought was unstable? A mother who hadn't slept a full night in years, who knew every brand of medicine safe for toddlers, who could tell you Lily's teacher's birthday and favorite tea, who built this entire life from behind the scenes while he smiled for the camera. No, I wasn't unstable. I was invisible, and he liked it that way. I went to Lily's room for comfort. She was sitting cross-legged on the rug, humming to herself, coloring. She looked up and beamed. "Look, Mommy," she said. "I made us." She held up a drawing. It was crude and sweet, stick figures under a rainbow. Me and her, smiling, holding hands, our house behind us. Brandon wasn't in the picture. "Why isn't Daddy there?" I asked gently. She shrugged. "He's always at work." I couldn't speak. My throat tightened. She looked at me for a long second, then added, "I like it better when it's just us." That night, after she was asleep, I opened my laptop and stared at a blank document. I wanted to write down everything, what I'd lost, what he'd taken, what I was afraid of. But the only words that came out were, "He's going to take her from me." And I couldn't let that happen. I opened my drawer and pulled out a photograph of my mother. She was young in it, holding me in one arm, a mop in the other, apron-stained, hair messy, but smiling. She had nothing, but she never let anyone take her dignity. I went to the bathroom and stared into the mirror again, but this time I stood straighter. This wasn't going to be about money. This wasn't going to be about revenge. This was about Lily. I whispered to my reflection, "You get up now. You start fighting now. You cry later." And in that moment, I didn't feel like a failure. I felt like a mother. Some battles in life begin in marble courtrooms. Mine began in a strip mall that smelled like burned coffee and old receipts. It had been 3 days since the financial rug was ripped out from under me. 3 days of realizing I wasn't just getting divorced, I was being deleted. Legally, financially, personally. Brandon didn't just want to leave me, he wanted to win. And he wanted me to vanish quietly so he could rewrite our story without me in it. I was done being quiet. But hiring a lawyer when you don't have money in your bank account? It felt laughable. I scrolled through dozens of polished websites. Law firms with names like Winfield, Carter, and Stone. Men in tailored suits. Testimonials glowing with unparalleled results. Their retainers started at $5,000. Some even required $10,000. I couldn't even afford a babysitter. But then, buried at the bottom of a dated-looking legal directory, I saw him. Jeremiah Grant, attorney at law, No slogan, no marketing. Just a short line. Former prosecutor, advocate for the overlooked. That word, overlooked, cut deep. That was me. Overlooked, overworked, overruled. His office was 15 minutes away, in a strip mall I used to pass on the way to Target. I remembered it for the pawn shop and a shuttered subway. The idea of my fight for custody starting in that cracked parking lot felt, at first, humiliating. But I went anyway. I dressed as neatly as I could. Hair brushed, a shirt without stains. I dropped Lily off at my neighbor's, promising to be back before lunch, then drove with my hands trembling the whole way. His office was tucked between a vape shop and a nail salon. The blinds were crooked. The open sign buzzed weakly in the window. Part of me thought, this is a mistake. But the other part, the one still clinging to something like courage, pushed open the door. The inside was quiet, lived in. The air smelled of old paper, cheap coffee, and something else I couldn't name. Maybe history, maybe truth. There was no receptionist, just a bell above the door and a voice calling from the back. Be right out, I waited, hands sweating against my jeans. Then he appeared, a man in his 60s, in a corduroy blazer with elbow patches, holding a mug that read, I object, in faded print. Rachel Miller, he asked. Yes, I said, surprised he already knew my name. He smiled and motioned me in. Come on back, I don't like waiting rooms. They're designed to make people feel small. His office was cramped, cluttered, and oddly comforting. Stacks of case files leaned dangerously on old bookshelves. On the wall hung a single framed quote, The truth is still the truth, even if no one believes it. A lie is still a lie, even if everyone believes it. I sat across from his desk, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm getting divorced, I said, and he's trying to take everything, including our daughter. He didn't interrupt. He didn't nod like a therapist. He just listened. I handed him the court documents. He read them carefully, flipping pages slowly, his brow furrowing in places. When he reached the final affidavit, he sighed. This guy plays dirty, he muttered. Brandon's a master at playing clean in public and filthy behind closed doors. He tapped a page. Emotional instability? That's what he's going with? I nodded. He had a psychologist write something. I've never even met her. Elise Monroe. Grant's eyes narrowed. That name rings a bell, not in a good way. My throat tightened. Is she legit? She's licensed, he said dryly. But that doesn't mean ethical. She's testified in some nasty cases. Always on the side with money. I looked down at my hands, twisting in my lap. I don't have much. I don't even have access to my own bank account. He locked me out of everything. He even took my jewelry. Grant leaned back. Let me guess. Mortgage in his name. Car, too. All of it, I whispered. He didn't look surprised. He just looked tired. Like he'd seen this story too many times. You're not the first woman to sit in that chair with nothing but a broken heart and a child worth more than gold, he said. But I only ask one thing before I take a case. I held my breath. What is it? He met my eyes. Do you want to win custody, or do you want revenge? It hit me harder than I expected. I want my daughter, I said. But if he thinks he can take her away from me and walk away clean? You want him to feel what you're feeling, Grant finished. Yes, I admitted, hating myself a little for saying it out loud. He nodded slowly. That's natural, but let me tell you something, Rachel. Revenge is a fire. It warms you fast and burns you just as quickly. If you want to win this for your daughter, you'll need to stay cold, strategic, clear. I stared at the wall. That quote again. About truth and lies. I nodded. Then teach me how, Grant smiled. Good answer. He stood and went to a filing cabinet, pulled out a yellow folder. My rates are low because I don't take cases for the money. You pay only if we win. You do the paperwork. I do the fighting. Deal? I couldn't speak. I just nodded, tears filling my eyes. He reached across the desk and offered his hand. Let's bring him back down to earth, he said. As I left the office, folder tucked under my arm, the sun peeked out from behind a cloud. It didn't feel like a sign. I don't believe in those anymore, but it felt like breath. A first breath after drowning. When I got back into the car, Lily looked up from her juice box. Did the grown-ups say yes? She asked. I smiled. He said yes. good, she said, like it was the most normal thing in the world. Now we win. No war begins with gunfire. It starts in whispers, glances, and choices dressed up as kindness. After I hired Grant, I braced myself for battle. I expected angry calls from Brandon, threats, maybe even legal escalations. But instead, he went quiet, which, coming from Brandon, was far more terrifying. For a few days, nothing happened. Just silence, until Thursday. I had just picked Lily up from school, her backpack bouncing with each step as she held my hand. She was chatting about a book her class was reading, something about a mouse detective, and I was nodding along, trying to stay present. That's when I saw it. Our driveway, and in it, a brand new SUV, black, sleek, expensive, parked neatly beside my battered old sedan. And leaning against it, smiling like a man who'd just won a bet, was Brandon. "Hey, baby girl," he called out to Lily. She squealed. "Daddy," she dropped my hand and ran to him. He lifted her up effortlessly, spinning her once, her laughter echoing down the street. "Look what Daddy got," he said, popping the SUV's trunk. Inside sat a giant pink bicycle, still shiny with tags and plastic wrap. Lily gasped. "For me?" "All yours," he said. "And guess what? There's something else." He pulled out a tablet, sleek, new, rose gold. I stood on the sidewalk, heart racing. "Brandon," I said, trying to stay calm. "We didn't discuss this." He turned toward me, still smiling like a politician on camera. "It's just a little gift. For our girl." I stepped closer. "You can't just show up unannounced with this." "She's my daughter too, Rachel," he said. Voice lower now, still pleasant but with a sharp edge. "I don't need your permission to give her what she deserves." I looked at Lily. She was already on the bike, helmet strapped on, pedaling in a small circle, giggling. And I felt it, that tight squeeze in my chest. Not jealousy, fear. Because Brandon didn't want to love her. He wanted to win her. That night, after he left with a rehearsed hug and a fake smile, I tucked Lily into bed. She clutched her new tablet, eyes wide with excitement. "Mommy," she asked softly, "why doesn't our house have a pool?" I froze. "What?" "Daddy says we could get one, if we move." My breath caught. "Move where, baby?" she shrugged. "He said someplace better, where people don't fight." She said it so innocently, so offhand, like she didn't know her words had just split something open inside me. I kissed her forehead. "Get some sleep, sweetheart." I walked into the living room and sat in the dark, staring at nothing. This wasn't just about legal strategy. It was psychological warfare. Brandon was drawing lines in Lily's mind. Lines between comfort and chaos. Between fun and fatigue. Between him and me. And I didn't have thousands to spend on bribes wrapped in ribbon. All I had was a needle. And red thread. That weekend, I found Lily's favorite old sweater. The blue one with the bunny on it. The sleeve had a small tear. She'd outgrown it months ago, but refused to throw it out. I sat down with it in my lap and slowly threaded the needle. Stitch by stitch, I mended the tear, not with white thread, but with red. It wasn't invisible. It stood out, bold and unapologetic. Because I wanted her to see it. When I finished, I placed the sweater on her pillow. Later that night, she found it. "You fixed Bun-Bun's sweater," she said, grinning. I nodded. "With red thread. So you'll always know where it was broken and how it was loved enough to be fixed." She looked at the stitches, then back at me. "Can I wear it tomorrow? It's a little small," I said. "But sure." She hugged me tight. That moment, quiet, unnoticed by any judge or lawyer, was my counterstrike. Not flashy, not expensive, but real. Over the next few days, I noticed small shifts. Brandon kept sending gifts, dolls, shoes, another tablet when the first got a scratch. But Lily? She started choosing the old things more. She still played with the new toys, sure, but she asked me to braid her hair. She brought her drawings to me first. She started asking questions, small, searching questions about truth. One evening, she looked at me and whispered, "Daddy says we don't need old stuff anymore, but I think he's wrong." I smiled, brushing her hair back. Old things carry memories. They remind us of who we are. And then, like she'd been holding it in for days, she whispered, "I don't like how he talks about you when you're not there." That shook me, deeply, but I stayed calm. What do you mean? I asked gently. She fidgeted. He says you're confused and tired all the time. That maybe I'd be happier with him. I swallowed. And what do you think? She looked me dead in the eye. I think you're the one who always shows up. And I broke, quietly, silently, right there on her bedroom floor. Because in a war of manipulation, truth always finds the cracks. Later that night, I texted Grant. He's playing the long game, she's confused, but I think she sees more than she lets on. He replied immediately, good, let him underestimate her. Keep documenting everything. And I did. Every visit, every gift, every offhand comment Lily repeated. I became a quiet archivist of Brandon's tactics, and I kept sewing. There's a special kind of silence that fills a house when a child is supposed to be home, but isn't. It doesn't just echo, it accuses. That Friday started like most others. I packed Lily's lunchbox with her favorite jelly sandwich, cut into triangles just the way she liked. I double-knotted her sneakers, kissed the top of her head, and watched her run into Brandon's car without looking back. That part always hurt a little, but I let it slide. She was 7. She didn't understand the politics of custody, or how every handoff between parents felt like pulling your heart through barbed wire. 5:30 sharp, I reminded him. He didn't respond, just closed the door and drove off like I was a stranger asking a favor. By 5:20 p.m., I was home, table set, mac and cheese warming on the stove, Lily's favorite chocolate pudding chilling in the fridge. I even lit the stupid vanilla candle she liked because it smells like cookies, Mommy. At 5:30, I checked the time. At 5:35, I checked the driveway. At 5:45, I texted, hey, just checking, are you running late? No answer. At 6 mock, I tried to stay calm. At 6:17, I called, straight to voicemail. At 6:42, I called again. Still nothing. By 7:10, I wasn't angry. I was terrified. I paced the living room, stopping every few steps to glance out the window. My ears strained for the sound of tires on gravel. A door slam. Lily's voice. Instead, I got silence. And silence is the cruelest sound when it fills the spaces where your child should be. Finally, at 7:38 p.m., the phone rang. Brandon's voice was casual, too smooth. Hey, don't freak out, she's with me. My hand clenched around the phone. You were supposed to bring her back over 2 hours ago. She wanted to stay, he said, as if that ended the conversation. She's having fun, we're watching a movie. You don't get to make that decision unilaterally, I snapped. We have a court-approved schedule. His voice dropped an octave. Temporary schedule, Rachel. Everything about your situation is temporary right now. My vision blurred, but I stayed quiet. He knew what he was doing, poking, provoking, trying to push me into saying something he could twist in court. I want to talk to her, I said through gritted teeth. She's asleep, he lied. I knew it was a lie because Lily never fell asleep before 9, not without her bunny or her white noise owl, and I knew he didn't take either with him. I'll have her back in the morning, he added. Relax. And then he hung up. I stared at the screen for a full minute. The silence after a call like that doesn't fade. It rings. A high-pitched whine behind your ribs. I sat down on the couch and stared at the uneaten mac and cheese, the pudding now slick with condensation. Everything I had prepared for her felt like a joke, a performance for an audience that never showed. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept the hallway light on, her bedroom door open. I stayed curled on the couch, phone clutched in my hand, praying she was safe. Every noise outside made my stomach twist. When she finally walked through the door the next morning at 9:13 a.m., I nearly collapsed. She had dark circles under her eyes and a new pink duffel bag slung over her shoulder. In her hand was a loud plastic toy with a flashing screen. She looked older, different. I opened the door. She dropped everything and threw her arms around me. Mommy, she whispered. I missed you. I held her so tightly I thought I'd break her. She didn't protest. She just buried her face in my neck and held on. Behind her, Brandon stood with a lazy grin and sunglasses pushed up into his hair. His cologne hit me before his words did. Something synthetic and heavy. She had a great night, he said. Watched some Disney, played some games. You violated our agreement, I said flatly. She's 7. She can decide where she wants to be. She's 7, I repeated. She's not a pawn. He gave me that smirk, the one that always made me feel like I was losing even when I was right, and turned to leave. I'm sure she'll tell you all about it. And then he was gone. Later that morning, while Lily was coloring, I started unpacking her duffel. Inside, a new toothbrush, new pajamas with the tags still on, a wrapped hairbrush. It was like she'd already moved, and everything smelled like someone else. Perfume, cheap, sweet, loud. Not mine, not hers. I bent over the bag and breathed it in again. There it was, the kind of scent you recognize even if you can't name it, because it doesn't belong. Hey baby, I asked gently. Was there someone else at Daddy's place? She paused, crayon in midair. Just Daddy, she said, a little too quickly. I nodded, not pushing, not yet. That night, as I brushed her hair, she said it, so casual it almost slipped past me. Daddy says we don't need old stuff anymore. My hands stilled. What do you mean? She looked up. He says we're getting a new house, new things, maybe even a new mommy. She said it without malice, just pure repetition, like she was quoting a cartoon. Like she didn't know she had just broken my heart clean in two. I swallowed hard. And how do you feel about that? She shrugged. I don't want a new mommy. I already have one. And then, softer. But Daddy says you're tired, that you're sad all the time. I closed my eyes. He was planting seeds, slowly, carefully, painting me unstable, depressed, unsafe. And it was working. That night, after she went to sleep, I sat in the dark, staring at her bedroom door. I didn't cry. I opened my phone and scrolled back to a photo I had taken 3 days ago. It was quick, almost accidental. A woman standing near Brandon's car outside Lily's school. She was holding a clipboard, blonde, tall, sunglasses. I zoomed in. Dr. Elise Monroe, the psychologist from Brandon's court documents. The one he claimed had evaluated me. What was she doing near my daughter? I stared at the photo for a long time, heart pounding. Brandon wasn't just undermining me emotionally. He was building something, laying a legal trap, one manipulation at a time. But here's the thing about Brandon. He always underestimated people who loved quietly. He underestimated me, and now he was underestimating Lily. Courtrooms don't look like battlegrounds. They're too quiet, too beige, too neat. But I learned that day, war doesn't need smoke and fire. Sometimes it just needs a suit, a lie, and someone willing to twist the truth until it chokes you. It was a Tuesday. Overcast, humid, and thick with the kind of tension that clings to your skin. I wore the only blazer I owned, navy blue, slightly tight across the shoulders. I hadn't worn it since Brandon's promotion dinner 3 years ago, the one where I smiled through clenched teeth while he thanked everyone but me. Lily stayed home with my neighbor, Miss Francine. She was used to babysitting for short spurts. But when I dropped Lily off that morning, she looked at me like she knew something bigger was happening. Hold your head high, baby, she said, even if they try to bury you in lies. I nodded. I couldn't speak. My throat already felt like it was closing. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. The wooden benches polished, the carpet dull gray. At the front, the judge's seat was slightly elevated, just enough to remind everyone where the power sat. Brandon was already there when I arrived, dressed in a sleek charcoal suit, tie knotted perfectly. He didn't look at me, not even once. He just sat with that same unreadable expression I'd grown so used to, part boredom, part superiority. Next to him, Elise Monroe, impeccable, sharp, cold. Grant, on the other hand, looked like he'd slept in his jacket and didn't care. I was grateful for that. Something about his rumpled presence made the courtroom feel a little less sterile, a little more human. When the judge entered, everyone stood. Be seated, he said. We'll begin with the petitioner's opening statements. Brandon's lawyer stood, confident, smooth, like he was selling a product. Only this time, the product was my failure. He called Brandon a pillar of emotional stability, a man concerned only with the well-being of his child. He spoke of Brandon's career, his consistency, his home structure. Then he shifted to me. Mrs. Miller, he said, has demonstrated signs of emotional volatility. She has no income, unstable housing, and there are concerns regarding her fitness to provide full-time care. He said it all calmly, professionally, like he wasn't gutting me in front of a room full of strangers. Then he called Elise Monroe to the stand. She walked up in heels that didn't make a sound. That alone unnerved me. She was sworn in and began reciting her qualifications. Licensed psychologist, 10 years of family court testimony, prior work in custody evaluations. Her resume read like a wall. Then came her assessment of me, a woman she had never spoken to, never observed in my own home. I've reviewed the behavioral reports provided by Mr. Miller, she said. There are indicators of depressive patterns, codependency tendencies, and fatigue-driven emotional inconsistency. I almost laughed. I didn't. She continued, quoting from emails I wrote months ago. Emails where I vented about being overwhelmed. Emails Brandon had forwarded to her without my knowledge. She expresses guilt, frustration, isolation, Elise said, like reading a menu. There is concern that these emotional states could compromise the child's development and emotional regulation. I sat frozen. Because she made it sound like being human was now evidence. Grant didn't stop her. Not yet. Then it was my turn. Grant stood slowly, adjusted his cuffs, and nodded toward the bench. I call Rachel Miller to the stand. I walked forward on numb legs. The bailiff swore me in. I sat. Grant stood beside me. Rachel, he said, do you love your daughter? It was the first question that didn't feel like a trap. With everything I have, I replied. Do you have a stable income right now? No, I said honestly. Brandon froze our accounts. I haven't had access since the papers arrived. Do you have a stable heart? I paused. Yes, I whispered. Even if it's been broken, it's steady, especially for her. Then the opposing lawyer stood. He circled me like a shark, voice polite but slicing. You've admitted to being overwhelmed, exhausted, struggling emotionally. Would you say these things affect your parenting? They affect how tired I am, I said, but not how present I am. He smirked. So you're saying emotional distress doesn't affect decision-making? I'm saying I've never made a decision that put my daughter in harm's way, ever. And what about this, he asked, holding up a printout. An email you sent at 2:14 a.m., stating you don't know who you are anymore. Is that the clarity of a fit parent? My breath caught. I wrote that after folding laundry at 2 a.m, I said. After Lily had the flu and vomited 6 times. I hadn't slept in 2 days. And I still made her lunch the next morning. That's what mothers do. For a moment, the room was quiet. But the damage was done. I felt it. Panic rising in my chest. My throat tightening. I looked at Brandon. He was smiling faintly. Not enough for anyone else to notice. But I saw it. That's when I broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just broke. I have nothing left, I said. He took our savings, the house, even my jewelry. And now he wants her. My voice cracked. She's the only thing he didn't earn, and the only thing I've never let go of. The judge looked up. Mrs. Miller, do you need a moment? Grant leaned toward me. I shook my head. No, I said, because I want to say this. I turned toward the judge. I've been painted as unstable because I cried, because I felt alone, because I was honest in emails. But if that's instability, then every mother I know is unfit. I may be tired, but I have never failed my daughter. Never, not once. The judge looked at me, then at Elise. Dr. Monroe, he said, you testified that you observed Mrs. Miller. How many times? She blinked. Once, from a distance. Did you ever speak to her? No. He scribbled something in his notes. That was it. I wasn't declared the winner that day. The judge said he needed to review everything before issuing a ruling. But I felt something change in the air. Outside, I collapsed onto the courthouse steps. Grant sat beside me. You stood up, he said. I fell apart, I whispered. Yeah, he replied. But then you got back up. That matters more. Some truths don't scream. They whisper from the corners. They wait. And sometimes they come from the hands of a 7-year-old girl who doesn't even know she's saving your life. The day after the hearing, the house felt heavier than ever. I walked through each room like I didn't belong in it anymore. Not because Brandon had taken everything, I'd already made peace with that, but because doubt had moved in. I kept replaying the judge's face in my head. The way he looked at me after Elise's testimony. The long pause after I spoke. His pen scratching slowly across that yellow legal pad. Not cruel, just unreadable. I didn't know what the ruling would be. And that not knowing was eating me alive. Lily was quiet too. She'd been quieter ever since the overnight visit. Since the scent of Elise's perfume still clung to her duffel bag. Since the words, "new mommy," had slipped out of her mouth without understanding what they meant. But that night, when the air outside turned cold and the kitchen clock clicked past midnight, I couldn't sleep. Again. I walked into Lily's room, just to check on her. She was curled under her blanket, Bunny tucked under one arm, her old tablet pressed to her chest like it was a stuffed animal. Not the new one Brandon bought. The old, beat-up one with the cracked case and dying battery, the one she refused to throw out. I sat on the edge of her bed, brushed a curl from her cheek, and gently slid the tablet out from under her arm. I didn't know why I did it. Maybe I just needed something to look at that wasn't court papers or bank statements or my own exhausted reflection. I turned it on. The screen flickered, struggling to stay alive. There were maybe 4% battery left. No Wi-Fi. Just a home screen full of messy folders with labels like cats, silly faces, and me and mommy. I opened one. Mostly pictures, some short video clips. I watched one. Lily making silly faces at the camera, then giggling uncontrollably when I walked by in the background. Wrapped in a towel, yelling, "Don't fill me with wet hair." I smiled. For the first time in what felt like weeks. Then I saw a file named Daddy's Secret. My breath hitched. I tapped it. The video opened with the sound of a car engine. The screen was tilted sideways. It had clearly been recorded without her knowing what she was doing, but I heard voices, Brandon's voice, and someone else, Elise. They were laughing at first. Then Brandon said something that chilled me. "Once the court gives me full custody, we're moving to Aspen. Rachel will be gone. Lily'll forget her in a month." Silence. Then Elise's voice, cold and amused. "Let's just hope the judge doesn't dig too deep." Brandon again. "He won't? We've got the narrative. Rachel's unstable, I'm the hero, judges love that." I dropped the tablet. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from clarity. Everything I had tried to prove, everything I knew was happening behind closed doors, was right there, in my daughter's innocent hands. She didn't even know what she had captured. I picked the tablet back up, backed out of the folder, and opened the settings. The video was dated 3 weeks ago. The location tag placed it just outside Brandon's condo. I needed to show Grant. But it was almost 1 a.m. Still, I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my coat, threw the tablet in my bag, and drove across town to his office. He answered the door in sweatpants and a worn hoodie, blinking against the hallway light like a bear disturbed from hibernation. "You better be dying," he grumbled. "I'm not," I said, "but he might be." He raised an eyebrow. 10 minutes later, we were in his office. I slid the tablet across the desk and hit play. He didn't blink through the whole recording, just leaned back slowly as the audio filled the room. When it ended, he sat in silence for a long time. Then he looked at me, something electric behind his eyes. "You realize what this is, right?" I nodded. "It's not just proof that they're in a relationship," I said. "It's proof of intent, malice, manipulation, perjury." Grant smiled for the first time in days. "It's checkmate." I exhaled, my whole body trembling. "But will it be enough?" I whispered. "Will they believe her voice, this footage? Will it hold up?" He leaned forward. "It's not about belief anymore," he said. "It's about evidence. And this is undeniable." I stared at the screen as it faded to black. The playback ended, silence returned. But it wasn't the silence of fear anymore. It was the kind that follows a storm when you realize the roof held. The next morning, I woke Lily gently, sat beside her on the bed. She rubbed her eyes. "Mommy, is something wrong?" "No, sweetheart," I said. "Something's finally right." She tilted her head. "Why?" I held up the tablet. "Because of you," she frowned. "I didn't do anything." "Yes, you did," I said, brushing her hair back. "You told the truth, even when you didn't know it." She looked at the screen. "That's the video from Daddy's car," I nodded. "Why did you record it?" She shrugged. "I just felt weird. I don't know. He was talking like mommy wasn't real, so I wanted to remember. I pulled her into my arms, tears threatening to spill. You remembered for both of us, I whispered. You can feel it when a moment is about to change everything. It's not loud at first. It hums beneath your skin. A quiet certainty, like the deep breath before a scream. The final day of the hearing came with strange weather. Overcast, but warm. Like even the sky wasn't sure what it wanted to be. I barely slept the night before. I kept replaying the video over and over in my mind. Brandon's voice, Elise's laugh, their plan, laid out so casually like I wasn't even a person, just an obstacle. Grant picked me up at 7:45 a.m. sharp. He didn't say much on the drive, but his fingers drummed against the steering wheel with nervous precision. You ready for this? He asked. I don't know, I answered honestly. But I think the truth is, inside the courtroom, everything felt the same. Same dull light, same worn carpet, same quiet rustle of papers and shifting chairs. But I felt different. This time, I wasn't walking in broken. I was walking in armed. Brandon sat at his table, looking confident, relaxed even. Elise was there too, in a navy dress and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The judge looked over his glasses at us and nodded. We're here to conclude proceedings, Mr. Grant. I understand you've submitted new evidence. Grant stood, calm, steady. Yes, Your Honor. With the court's permission, I'd like to present a video recorded by the minor in question. It is time-stamped, geotagged, and unaltered. It is, to the best of our knowledge, an authentic recording of a conversation between the petitioner, Mr. Brandon Miller, and Dr. Elise Monroe. The judge raised an eyebrow. Go on. Grant nodded to the bailiff, who wheeled a monitor to the center of the courtroom. The lights dimmed slightly. The screen came to life. It was shaky, of course. The angle was strange, sideways, shot through the crack between a front seat and a window. But the audio was unmistakable. Brandon's voice, smooth and smug. Once the court gives me full custody, we're moving to Aspen. Rachel will be gone. Lily'll forget her in a month. Then Elise's voice, low and amused. Let's just hope the judge doesn't dig too deep. And then Brandon again. He won't. We've got the narrative. Rachel's unstable. I'm the hero. Judges love that. The room went silent. Dead silent. I didn't breathe. I looked across the courtroom at Brandon. His face drained of color. His jaw tightened. He shifted in his seat like the ground beneath him had tilted. Elise leaned forward, as if trying to will the screen off. When the video ended, there was a beat. Just one, but it landed like thunder. Then the judge moved. He took off his glasses, folded them slowly, deliberately, placed them on the bench in front of him, and looked straight at Brandon. Mr. Miller, he said, voice low, steady, do you deny that the voice in that video is yours? Brandon opened his mouth, closed it. I don't recall that conversation, he stammered. Do you deny it's your voice? He looked at Elise, then back to the judge. It's taken out of context. The judge didn't blink. I find it difficult to imagine a context where such a statement would be anything but manipulative and dishonest. He turned to Elise. Dr. Monroe, you testified under oath that your involvement was professional, objective, and based on observation. Would you like to amend your statement? Elise sat frozen, her hand clenched around the armrest. I wasn't aware I was being recorded. That, the judge said flatly, was not the question. Elise said nothing. The judge leaned back, took a breath, then said louder this time. Mr. Miller, it is the opinion of this court that you have attempted to defraud the legal process. You manipulated psychological testimony, orchestrated false narratives, and sought to unjustly remove the child from her mother under pretense. This court does not tolerate such abuse of legal systems. Brandon shifted again, his face now red and panicked. I was trying to protect my daughter, he said. The judge slammed his gavel once, sharp, loud. You were trying to protect your control. The silence that followed was no longer heavy. It was electric. I felt Grant glance at me, but I couldn't look away from Brandon. For the first time in our entire relationship, our marriage, our fight, our war, I saw something I'd never seen before. Fear, not rage, not calculation, pure fear. The judge turned to me. "Mrs. Miller," he said, "do you have anything you'd like to add before I deliver my ruling?" I stood. Slowly, my knees shaking. "I just want my daughter to grow up knowing that the truth matters," I said. "Even when people try to bury it, even when it's scary to speak it. I want her to know that love doesn't lie, that it doesn't manipulate, that it stays." The judge nodded. He turned to the court clerk. "In the matter of custody of Lily Miller, full legal and physical custody is hereby granted to the respondent, Rachel Miller. Visitation rights for Mr. Miller are suspended pending further investigation. Furthermore, Dr. Elise Monroe's credentials and testimony will be subject to independent review." He paused. "And finally, I am requesting an immediate investigation into perjury and obstruction of the court process on the part of Mr. Miller." Brandon stood. "This is insane," the judge's voice sharpened. "You are dismissed, Mr. Miller." Security stepped forward. Brandon stepped back. I stood there, barely able to process what had just happened. The war was over, not in a blaze of glory, but in a quiet, undeniable drop of truth that shattered every lie he had built. I felt a hand slip into mine. "Grant." He looked at me, eyes soft. "Well," he said. "That was satisfying." I laughed. It broke out of me suddenly, a sound I hadn't heard in weeks, months. It felt like oxygen. "I can breathe again," I said. He nodded. "Good, because now you start living again. The strangest part of surviving a storm is waking up and realizing the sun still rises, that people still laugh in coffee shops, that bread still rises in ovens, that life, without permission, goes on." 3 weeks after the ruling, Lily and I moved into a modest 2-bedroom apartment on the east side of town. Nothing fancy. The water pipes hissed in the morning, and the heater clicked like a nervous typewriter, but the windows were wide, and the walls were ours. For the first time in a long time, I could hang a picture without asking. The first thing I put up was one of Lily's drawings, a stick figure version of me holding a giant cupcake, with a speech bubble that said, "Mommy's not broken." I cried when I pinned it to the fridge, not because it hurt, but because I finally believed her. Lily adapted quickly. Children do, if you give them safety instead of secrets. She decorated her new room with fairy lights and taped stars to the ceiling. Her bunny got a permanent spot on the windowsill, and her tablet, old and cracked, stayed by her pillow like a trusted soldier. As for me, I found peace in the most unexpected place: flour. Baking had always been something I did in between everything else, but now it became a kind of therapy. Something about measuring ingredients and watching dough rise made me feel human again, present. So when the idea of Little Fire Bakery first came to mind, I thought it was a joke. "I can't open a bakery," I told Grant one day, sitting across from him in a booth at the diner. "Why not?" he said, sipping bitter coffee. "You've already done the impossible. This should be easy." I looked at him, exhausted but light for the first time in months. "And what if I fail?" He raised an eyebrow. "Then you'll still bake better than any lawyer in this county." That was all the push I needed. I found a tiny storefront tucked between a tailor and a pet grooming salon. The landlord was skeptical, but when I brought her a tray of cinnamon rolls during our second meeting, the lease practically signed itself. Lily helped me paint the front sign. The name was her idea, Little Fire. When I asked her what it meant, she just said, "Because you're small but strong, like a little fire that doesn't go out." It opened 2 months after the ruling. The walls were white, the counter handmade, and the tip jar red, for new shoes and stronger moms. We had no grand opening party, no press release, just a chalkboard on the sidewalk that said, "Fresh bread, warm muffins, soft hearts welcome." Customers came slowly at first, curious locals, a teacher who recognized me from parent nights, a woman going through her own divorce who said the smell of banana bread gave her the courage to file. Some days we sold out, some days we didn't. But every day I got to look across the counter and see Lily drawing, laughing, living, and that was more than enough. One quiet afternoon, Lily came to the counter holding something in her hand. It was my old wedding ring. I blinked. "Where did you get that?" I asked. "Your sock drawer," she said casually. "You hid it under the red thread." Of course I did. I took it gently, turning it over in my palm. Simple, gold, no stones, no sparkle, just a thin band that once meant something sacred. I stared at it for a long time. "You gonna wear it again?" Lily asked. I hesitated. "It's not a marriage anymore," she shrugged. "Then wear it for something else." I looked at her. "You mean like, for me?" She smiled. "Yeah, wear it so you remember who you are." So I slipped it onto my right hand. Not because I was his, but because I was mine. Later that evening, while the ovens cooled and Lily finished her homework in the back, the front bell jingled. It was Grant, in jeans, no tie, holding a manila envelope, and wearing that same reluctant smirk he always carried when he was trying not to be sentimental. "Didn't think you'd actually open this place," he said. "You underestimated me. Again." He held up a palm. Guilty. I handed him a chocolate muffin, still warm. He took a bite, nodded once. Perfectly burnt on the edges, just the way I like it. We sat on the bench outside for a while. He handed me the envelope. It held Lily's finalized custody paperwork. No appeals, no challenges. Brandon had quietly dropped off the radar, pending investigation. I held the envelope in my hands, but I didn't open it. I didn't need to. It was already done. "You know," Grant said, looking out at the street, "some people think revenge is about making them suffer, but real revenge is this." "What?" He nodded toward the bakery, toward Lily. "Living, loving, and never letting them steal another piece of you." I looked at him, then at my reflection in the glass. Hair pulled back, flour on my apron, laughter still clinging to my lips from earlier. He was right. This wasn't revenge. This was resurrection. Before he left, he dropped a $10 bill in the tip jar. "For the shoes," he said. Then he winked. "Or the moms." That night, Lily and I danced in the kitchen while cookies cooled. I played the same song on repeat, some old folk tune she didn't know the words to, but made up anyway. She stopped mid-spin and looked up at me. "Mommy?" "Yeah?" "I'm glad you didn't give up." I crouched down, pressed my forehead to hers. "Me too, baby." We stood there, in the middle of a tiny kitchen in a tiny apartment above a tiny bakery, and I realized this isn't the ending. This is the beginning I thought I'd never earn. And it's more beautiful than any life he ever promised me. There are battles that require no blood or bullets. Only a mother brave enough to stand up, even with empty hands, a child sensitive enough to hold on to the truth, and a heart once shattered, yet never ceasing to beat for love. I did not fight to take revenge. I simply reclaimed what should have always been mine, my daughter's trust, my own voice, and a life no longer controlled by someone else. If you've ever stayed silent because you were hurt, ever been doubted when you were telling the truth, or ever had to hold yourself together just to protect someone you love, I hope this story reaches you. Leave a message for a woman you know who is fighting her silent battle, or for yourself. Not to recount suffering, but to remind one another that there are wounds that weaken us, but there are also wounds that lead us into the light, stronger than ever.